all interest payments on all debts were forgiven. We went to zero interest rates everywhere. That reset the global economy. It's exactly the same time as Bitcoin came out. So they're all birthed. Zero interest rates and Bitcoin are birthed at the same time. Probably the real summer doesn't get going till Q2 2024. That's when things start to get crazy again. So I think macro is actually the dominant factor and the halving is a false narrative, but it doesn't matter because it still works.
During the recent interview, Real Vision CEO Raoul Pal breaks down the macro factors that may spark the next crypto bull market and explains how to prepare for it. It's been a wild ride for Bitcoin over the last 14 years. It was born out of the financial crisis of 2008. The 2008 financial crisis caused deep financial strains in the U.S., leading the Federal Reserve to take aggressive actions to stabilize the economy. In an effort to prevent an economic collapse, the Federal Reserve implemented a number of unconventional policies, including zero interest rates. During the interview, Powell suggests that the Bitcoin halving aligns with the macroeconomic cycle, similar to the conditions when Bitcoin was born. This means that every halving has occurred in a similar economic environment characterized by monetary expansion and low interest rates. The next Bitcoin halving is predicted for April 2024. However, there is a concern because the Federal Reserve is currently planning to increase interest rates. According to Mike McGlone's analysis, the Federal Reserve aims to raise interest rates by the end of this year, targeting a rate of around 5.46% compared to the current effective rate of 5.33%. Federal Reserve officials signaled support for another rate rise this year and fewer cuts in 2024, even as the U.S. Central Bank held its benchmark interest rate steady at a 22-year high. During the interview, Powell mentioned the main catalysts favoring crypto next year are central banks cutting interest rates and potential fiscal stimulus that could precede the United States presidential election. Now, let's direct our attention towards the few clips from interview.
I think the halving is coincidental to the macro cycle. It just so happens that in 2008-9, magic things happened. One, all interest payments on all debts were forgiven. We went to zero interest rates everywhere. That reset the global economy. It's exactly the same time as Bitcoin came out. So they're all birthed. Zero interest rates and Bitcoin are birthed at the same time. And the macro cycle is this debt refi cycle every 3.5 years to 4 years that happens that exactly corresponds to the crypto cycle. I think it's coincidental. So I think macro is actually the dominant factor and the halving is a false narrative, but it doesn't matter because it still works, right? It's the same cycle. So you can measure it any way you want. So if we go, okay, well, what's going to be happening next year? So next year, the central bank will be cutting rates. Next year, there might be fiscal stimulus because there's an election. Next year, if the economy's slow, they're likely to be doing quantitative easing. So that's the full set of things that you've seen on every cycle so far. So, yeah, I think it's the same. Now, there is a risk that it's not. Of course, I understand that something changes and the central banks stay higher for longer, nothing changes, liquidity doesn't come back. But that's yet to be proven.
So what do you think is the potential here in terms of price appreciation?
Look, I've learned from the past is we don't give price appreciation because you get beaten over the head by people for it. So, it's not worth it anymore. But normally prices rise from these kind of levels, 5x plus, it goes beyond the all-time high and maybe doubles that or triples that. That's the kind of zone that normally happens. Does that happen this time? I have no idea. I don't see why anything's changed. And I think the whole crypto market, Bitcoin usually underperforms in the bull cycle. So, whatever Bitcoin does, ETH will do more, Solana might do more than that, and something else, whatever, will do a lot more than that. So that's because there's a risk curve, same as there are in all markets. So that's what I'm thinking will happen this time around. I don't see any reason it shouldn't, but, as you said, there's not been many examples so far of this. So you've got kind of a few cycles and it's like, Is it going to happen every time? Who the hell knows?
For much of the last year, recession fears have been building against a sharp rise in interest rates and market uncertainty. Underlying U.S. inflation moderated in August, with the annual rise in prices excluding food and energy falling below 4%. The unemployment rate is expected to drop to 3.7%, near a 50-year low, from 3.8% in August. During the interview, Powell mentioned that the easing of economic pressure on the markets, along with the favorable economic conditions, is beneficial for cryptocurrencies and assets like Bitcoin. Looking at past performance, Powell believes Bitcoin could double or triple its latest all-time highs. Now, let's direct our attention towards the few clips from interview.
Last year, in 2022, we started to see all the forward-looking macro indicators, stuff like liquidity, stuff like the ISM survey, all of this stuff was falling sharply. It was all signaling that we were going to go into recession. All assets fell in 2022. I mean, everything. Crypto, equities, bonds, the lot, because it was pricing in a recession because of the inflation, the interest rate rises, all of those things. So for me, it all got priced in last year. Then this year, we've seen what I refer to as crypto spring, but we've also seen macro spring, which is the forward-looking indicators are now at the bottom and starting to rise quite sharply. So it suggests that we're transitioning through into better times. So where the economy is right now is probably at its slowest point. So a lot of people is like, well, where's my recession? It's most likely to happen in this quarter and maybe Q1. But we're already seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on the other side, which is why assets have been strong. And everyone's like, what? Why is the NASDAQ up 40%? And why is Bitcoin up 60%? It's because they're already pricing it. So I'm incredibly positive. So why is that? Well, if you think about what happens at this point in the cycle, when we're going into that recession phase, we're really in the slowdown phase. Inflation falls, unemployment usually rises, the central bank usually stops hiking, which it feels that the Fed and certainly the ECB have got to, and others. So that takes some of the pressure off markets. And then as inflation comes down, unemployment rises, or something breaks, like the banks, then we get what I refer to as more cowbell, which is more stimulus, which is the likely use of quantitative easing, cutting of interest rates. We've seen the US give some stimulus to the banks. So we're starting that stimulus cycle, early stage. And again, these are the kind of things that crypto loves. That's the golden times. And that's where we come. And I think that we might see the first signs of summer. So if you think of it in a calendar, sometime by around May, the days suddenly you start to get some really nice hot days and the weather starts to get better. That's what I think we'll get to by the end of this year. So the markets will feel stronger. People will have a bit more optimism, although the economy is going to look bad. That's where you start transitioning towards summer. Probably the real summer doesn't get going till Q2 2024. That's when things start to get crazy again.
While the next Bitcoin halving is anticipated in April 2024, Fed officials skip rate rise, but signal one more to come this year. In the US, we can see that despite the stress of the previous months, the situation does not seem to be critical and definitely different from what it was in 2008. At the moment, the situation for the fourth quarter of 2023 is still very uncertain. Most likely Bitcoin and all the rest of the crypto market will only return to see strong price rises in conjunction with the first rate cut. That wraps up our discussion for today. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you find this content informative, do not forget to give a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for latest updates. Thanks for joining us.